In exactly the same way that the Holy Prophet ﷺ knew that what God is telling me is the truth. He never stopped preaching. And in the same way, we won't stop preaching.
It's against the teaching of Islam to force anyone into belief, which is la ikraha fi din. There's no compulsion in matters of faith.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته, and welcome to the second program of MTA's Face to Face. In this program, the second group of contestants will kind of compete for the two places that we are giving for the semi-finals, which will happen in a few weeks' time. Just to give you a brief overview why we came up with this program, what is the purpose behind this program? Hazrat Muslim Maud Razila Ta'ala Anhu, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Sani Razila Ta'ala Anhu, when he came up with the Majlis Khuddamul Ahmadiyya, one of the purposes that Hazur defined at that time was for them, for these male members from the ages from 15 to 40, to answer allegations that were raised by the opponents of Jamaat-e-Ahmadiyya and also by the opponents of Islam. So nowadays, in today's modern day and age, you have different khuddam, different members of the Jamaat answering on different platforms. Everybody has their own way of argumentation. Everybody has their own way of presenting certain or answering certain allegations or answering certain questions. So we thought, why not put everything together and have it streamlined basically on one platform. And also the main purpose of this program, as we mentioned last time as well, and it's also on our website, is to educate the viewers at home, not just the contestant that will receive very helpful guidelines from our judges here in the studio, but also for everyone at home, that's you watching our program. And as I said, and you know, every week, every Sunday, we will be live with you from 7 p.m. GMT, inshallah. The topic for today's program, or the scenario that we give out every week, was that a 12-year-old Tifl asks you, why are they not allowed to eat pork as all the other children in school? Something which is quite topical, and every Tifl asks this question here in Western countries as well. Now, you at home, of course, being the viewers, but other than that, we are asking you to take part in the voting as well. So the lines will be open at the end of the program. You will see a short notice, or I am going to announce it at the end of the program as well. If and when the lines are open, it's going to be an online voting, so you can go on www.mta.tv/face-to-face, and the 5 contestants will be there, and you can cast your vote for whomever you think did the best job. With us in the studio, as I mentioned, here to help us and of course to guide the contestants as well, we have our panel of judges. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Jazakumullah ahsan for joining us today. To my far right, we have Amr Safi Sahib, who is the editor of the Review of Religions magazine. To his right, we have Mohammad Zahid Sahib, who is currently serving as a teacher in Jami Ahmadiyya UK. And to his right, we have Abdul Qudus Arif Sahib, who is a member of the National Amla of Majlis Khuddamul Ahmadiyya here in the UK. One thing that we forgot to mention last time, of course, every competition has to have a prize as well. And the prize that the winner of this face-to-face competition will get is that he will be able, or he will get the chance to present a program and host a program or a show here on MTA International. We're going to go to our first contestant. As you might have noticed last week, the format of the program is that we speak to our first contestant, and then we will watch the video, the submission, or the 3-minute clip that they have submitted, and then the judges will have a chance to talk to them as well. With us on the line, we have Sajeel Ahmad Sahib from Pakistan. Assalamu alaikum, Sajeel Sahib. How are you doing today?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm fine, thank you very much.
Sajeel Sahib, tell us a little bit about yourself. What is it that you do?
I'm a doctor. I'm a surgical resident in oral and maxillofacial surgery. That's the surgery of the face, the head and neck, the jaws. I'm originally from Rabwa, and currently I'm in Lahore.
Interesting, interesting. Now, the question or the scenario that you were given was that a 12-year-old Tifl asks you why we can't eat pork. Now, this question or this scenario is something that you wouldn't imagine you see or hear a lot in an Islamic society or an Islamic country. How difficult, was it challenging to come up with the answer?
It was certainly interesting, and I suppose perhaps a little easier than the other questions. At least I thought it was. I think the other questions required a more thorough religious knowledge. But I suppose this question already existed, the debate already existed, so I could find material on it during my research. I enjoyed it.
So, being a doctor, who actually was the person behind it who said, you know what, you should submit your video to this program?
Mainly it was our local guide sub, Usama sab. He kept motivating me and following up. But my brother-in-law, he loves these sort of questions, yeah. So he encouraged me a lot too.
All right, very well. Jazakallah for that. Let's go to your video reply. Let's see.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The question about why Muslims cannot eat pork has a relatively straightforward answer, that Allah Almighty has forbidden it in the Holy Quran. And we as Muslims believe that if a distinction has been made about whether we can do a certain thing or not, then it is always in our best interests to follow those rules and regulations, regardless of whether we can understand the wisdom or logic behind them. In the case of eating pork, we can easily break down the scientific reasons of why pork is bad for you. And this has both physical as well as spiritual aspects. Both of these, however, are related to how the pig as an animal is an example of all those qualities that one should not be. Dirty, greedy, and with no sense of loyalty or propriety. Pigs are also notorious for living in mud, eating filth and rubbish, and sometimes even their own dead. Homosexuality and their promiscuous nature also show their immoral habits. The reason why eating pork is bad for your body is that it harbors a number of parasites that can cause disease in humans. More recently though, studies show that the pig's digestive system is unable to break down certain toxins in its body, and these can be incorporated into our bodies when we eat pork. Regarding the spiritual aspect of eating pork, it is very bad for the soul. As Hazrat Masih Maud explains in his book, The Philosophy of the Teachings of Islam, that there are certain things like our surroundings, our environment, our friends, and even our food and diet that affect the soul. And regarding the pig, he says in the book that everyone knows that it eats filth and is utterly shameless. Thus the reason for the prohibition of its flesh is obvious, as by the laws of nature its flesh would have a foul effect on the body and the soul of one who eats it. So to summarize, despite the obvious health risk effects of eating pork, the soul also needs protection from the possible inculcation of all the immoral values that are represented by the pig, and that is why we must abstain from eating pork. Thank you very much. Jazakallah.
All right, so that was the video sent to us by Sajeel Ahmad Sahib from Pakistan. Mohammed Sahib, very calm, very relaxed, as a doctor should be. What do you say?
Jira Sahib, I liked the way he spoke. He spoke very clearly with a lot of confidence. And as you said, his tone was very friendly, and that made Sajeel Sahib. Can I talk to you? Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, ji.
You had a very friendly tone, which made you all the more approachable for a 12-year-old Tifl, the scenario which was given. And you sounded very credible as well. And as you told us that you are a doctor, we were probably expecting the facts you were giving to be a bit more like authenticated by some credible sources. Do Did you consult these the facts you have given? Did you check them from any credible source, or you have given them from top of your head?
The trouble with this question sort of is that a lot of scientific research into the pig's meat hasn't really been carried out. So there's conflicting evidence. But what I wanted to do was focus on the spiritual side of the debate, because a lot of people are saying that it's bad, but as you said, there's a lack of scientific evidence about why exactly is it bad for you. But there is the World Health Organization. It has confirmed that processed meats, and pork is actually a big category in processed meats, that has the greatest chance of causing cancers. It's classified it as a class 1 carcinogen for colorectal cancer. So there is evidence to support that processed meat is very bad for you.
Amr Sahib, would you like to ask Sajeel Sahib?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah, I enjoyed your answer. I think you covered a lot of very important points. So I wanted to ask you, you mentioned about the conflicting scientific evidence. So I find that interesting. So I think I agree with you from what my humble research as well. So one thing interesting, Khalid Khalif Tomasi Rabi, rahmahullah, he mentioned that although you can go into the science, we don't just rely on the science for this particular debate about not eating pig's meat. And the reason is that if you focus just on the fact that the pig's meat itself is not healthy to eat, then someone can say that there are other animals that are similarly harmful, and that may lead to a slippery slope when debating this topic. However, one aspect that Hazrat Khalid Tomasi Rabi focused on, and there is some academic research on, is the fact that pigs have been seen to eat their own piglets, even the dead babies of the pigs. And this is a process called savaging. And there is, again, little research on this, but there are some academic papers that have been done, which shows that generally this is much more prevalent, in fact, arguably the most seen amongst pigs or certain type of pigs above other animals. And Hazrat Khalid Tomasi Rabi said that, as you mentioned, because of the connection between the body and the soul, this is one reason why we avoid the pigs, if you want to go down that aspect of research.
Just to let the viewers know as well, that part of the program is also part of the kind of the final mark that the contestants get. So the judges have the opportunity to ask a question to the contestants, and depending on how they do, it could be good or it could be bad. Hopefully it's all good today. We're going to move on to our next contestants. Jari Sahib from Canada is with us on the line. Assalamu alaikum, Jari Sahib. How are you today?
Ji, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah for joining us today at Jari Sahib, and congratulations for making it to the quarterfinals, first of all. If I may ask you, what do you do in your day-to-day life?
My day-to-day life is primarily consists of Jamaat work in the Tabligh department and the media relations team, and then full-time work in marketing.
So tell us about some of the activities. I mean, Canada Jamaat, by the grace of God, is quite active when it comes to Tarbiyat and, of course, Tabligh programs as well. But specifically when it comes to Khuddam, because we are speaking to Khuddam from all across the globe on this program, what is it that you do in Canada, or some of the programs that you are involved in?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. Alhamdulillah, even right now, actually, we're in the core of downtown Toronto, which is Canada's biggest city. And we're doing an event called Coffee and Islam, where we solicited lots of flyers. This is actually one of the biggest campaigns that NKAC is doing right now. And alhamdulillah, we're getting a lot of media coverage. We've had over 100 signups, and we're sitting down with Canadians and discussing Islam at a grassroots level and answering their questions. Over the past few years, we realized that it's very important to sit down with people and talk to them and tackle some of the questions that they have. And so that way you can actually progress in your tabligh activities and inshallah eventually show them and guide them towards Islam.
Well, Jazakallah for that. Grassroots level, he mentioned, this is actually one of those grassroots level questions when it comes to Islam. Why are we not allowed to eat pork? Let's go to the reply that you sent us.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, my fellow Tifl brothers. My name is Jari from Canada, and I'll be talking about why you can't eat pork at school. There's many reasons why we can't eat pork as Muslims. When Allah the Almighty created us as human beings, He prescribed certain things for us as lawful and others as unlawful for us in the Holy Quran. The things that Allah described unlawful for us are either bad for our spiritual well-being or our physical or moral well-being. When it comes to the concept of pork, it's actually very bad for all three of these things. And today I'll talk a little bit about why. My fellow Tifl brothers, let's look at it from a health perspective first and a scientific point of view. Eating pork is very unhealthy for you. Pork and pigs are in fact the only animals in the world that actually eat their own children, and that is just disgusting. Another thing is, when it comes to a pig, its digestive system is very weak. It's not able to capture nutrients when it consumes food. Human beings, for example, have a very good digestive system. Our digestive system is up to 8 to 12 hours. An animal like a cow, which also has a strong digestive system, has a digestive system of 24 hours. Pigs, only 4 hours. So whatever they eat, they're not able to capture nutrients, and so as a result, it's very unhealthy for you. Another thing, you at Tifl, you love to go out and play sports. That's very important. Why? Because you sweat. Sweating removes toxins and chemicals from your body. Pigs, they don't sweat. They don't have sweat glands, and so all the toxins, all the chemicals, all these nasty things called parasites are kept within the body of the pig, and so that when you eat it, it's very unhealthy for you. Next, let's talk about it from a religious point of view. The Promised Messiah ﷺ, in his book Philosophy of the Teachings of Islam, mentions why certain foods that we eat actually impact our morality. He talks about when you eat meat, it instills concepts of bravery in you, whereas when you eat vegetables, for instance, it gives you humbleness and meekness. When he talks about the swine, he says that the reason why we don't eat swine is because it's a very filthy animal. The swine, the Arabic word is khinzir, which actually means I see it as a very foul thing. So God Almighty innately in the Arabic language describes what He sees about, pigs and pork. So this is why eating pork is very unhealthy for you. The Prophet ﷺ, when he was sent, the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, prophesied that he has come to this earth to break the cross and to kill the swine. What does it mean when the Holy Prophet said he'll kill the swine? It means he'll kill swinish behavior. He'll remove this behavior of immorality within the people, especially those people that accept his Jamaat. My fellow Tifl brothers, if we look at sports superstars like LeBron James, for example, even he said he doesn't eat pork because it's very bad and it limits his performance. So whether it's your spiritual being, if it's your physical well-being, or if it's your moral well-being, eating pork is very unhealthy for you from all these perspectives. And so that's why in Islam, it's something that Muslims are not allowed to do. Jazakallah.
Jazakumullah for that. That was Jari Saab from Canada. His reply, Amr Saab, because the scenario is you're talking to a Tifl, language is also very important. You got to go a little bit down to their level. How did Jari Saab do in this one?
Jari Saab's on the line?
Yes, he is.
Assalamu alaikum. Jari Saab? Is he on the line with us?
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Jari Saab. Jari Saab, I thought in terms of your presentation, you did excellent in terms of the way you could possibly connect with a kid. You were very friendly. You spoke measuredly. And I feel that a 12-year-old kid could easily sit down and be able to listen to your whole 3-minute presentation. So I say well done on that front. In terms of any negative points, I would just say that whilst you covered many points, you mentioned one thing, that it's the only animal who eats its own children. I would just wanted to know where you got that research from.
Yeah, Jazakallah for pointing that out. I actually meant to say it's one of the only animals, but due to unavailability of time to re-record it, I just let that one pass by. But so just factually speaking, it is one of the only animals that eat its own children, but I don't think there's many that eat its own dead children, and this would be even uniquely a smaller percentage of that subset.
So I mean, that's the point I would pick out and just say that it's very important to be accurate, because you don't want a 12-year-old kid to afterwards go and Google and see that maybe there are some other animals. You are right from my research as well. pigs are probably one of the only, or predominantly you see that amongst pigs. And the research that's done for savaging, which I mentioned earlier, is where mothers or fathers eat their offspring, is predominantly done amongst pigs. So I would just pick that out just to be a bit more accurate with the research, so the kid doesn't go away and think anything's being exaggerated. But just to stress, yes, this is predominantly seen amongst certain type of pigs.
They don't just Google it, Qudrat. They also, because you're telling him at that stage the information, the first-hand information, the first information about that question that he gets, and then they go on to explain it to others in the same way that you have explained it to them. So there's very careful you need to be when it comes to this, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, if someone is approaching you with a question, most probably it's not just for their own knowledge, but rather to explain to their friends as well at school.
Exactly.
So why we don't eat pork. That's probably predominantly the reason they're asking the question to a khadim or someone who they consider worthy enough to answer the question.
Any pointers for Jari?
I love the fact that you mentioned a sportsman. I think that's a very good way of engaging the atfal. And like Ahmed Bhai mentioned, that you came across very well. You can tell you're from marketing. You probably sell a lot of things as well. So, you know, well done, good job.
I really like his presentation. I definitely see him going to the next rounds. Unless we have an even better video later on. Yeah. But picking on the point which Amir Sahib actually mentioned in the beginning, he also mentioned that they cannot sweat at all. I was also reading about them. They have some sweat glands around their snout, so they do sweat, but they sweat very little. They have very few sweat glands around their snout, so they do sweat actually. And it again proves the same point which Amir Sahib was telling in the beginning, that the information which we give should be very credible.
All right. Jari Sahib, hopefully that these points reached you. And well, according to Mohammed Sahib, you're making it to the next round. I'm not saying anything. For the viewers at home, you can join us when it comes to the voting at the end of the program. When the lines are open, it's an online voting. We will let you know. You will be informed, and you can vote for one of the individuals that are taking part in today's program. Jazakallah to Jari Sahib. We're going to move on. Naveed Ahmed Zafar Sahib from Pakistan is with us on the line. Assalamu alaikum, Naveed Sahib. How are you today?
Wa alaikum assalam, rahmatullah. Very fine, alhamdulillah.
Naveed Sahib, answering question that are raised by children is always a bit tricky. So what's your approach when young Tifl or young children ask you a question? I mean, you can't pull out the big scientific research, you can't pull out the long verses of the Holy Quran. How do you approach that?
Well, obviously it was a difficult task to see a world the way a 12-year-old sees it. And for that I took an example from a day-to-day life, from his day-to-day life, that can explain it much better when it comes to understanding different things.
Okay. Anything you would like to say to our judges or to the viewers before we go to your video?
Nothing much, not thought of anything yet.
Just enjoy the video, isn't it? One thing that I would like to tell the viewers is that the views presented by our contestants, not just in today's program, but also throughout the series of Face to Face, are not necessarily the official viewpoint of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat. These are their own personal views of the participants. So that's something that I should have mentioned in the beginning as well. Naveed Sahib, that has nothing to do with, because your video is next. I just thought I put it out there. Well, we're going to go to Naveed Sahib's reply. Let's see what he sent in.
Why don't we eat pork? Simply because Allah has forbidden us from eating it in the Holy Quran, and moreover it's a divine commandment of our Creator. See, when the parents stop us from doing something, we refrain ourselves from doing it, whether we are alone or we are with them. Reason being that we love them and we know that they love us even more. So it is this bond of love that makes us obey our parents. Then how is it possible that we can disobey God Almighty, who himself says that he loves his creation more than the love of 70 mothers? So the fact is that God Almighty cares for us, and whatever he tells us definitely holds wisdom in it for us. And surely it is told for a reason. Actually, pork is very injurious for our health. Promised Messiah has pointed out that whatever we eat, it impacts us morally, spiritually, and physically. And Greek physicians have held this opinion that consumption of pork can cause lack of modesty, and it can even foster shamelessness in a human being. So basically, pigs are very dirty animals and they have very bad habits. And the habits which include social as well as eating habits. For example, pigs are scavengers which eat dead, and they even don't hesitate to eat their own piglets or their own siblings. And even more disgusting is the fact that they eat their own excretion. And these are all those traits that show that God Almighty did not create this animal for human consumption. It was rather meant to be a recycler in our ecosystem. Another problem with pigs is that there are worms, toxins, bacteria, and viruses in its body, which when consumed can lead to more than 70 diseases in the human body. And modern scientific research has acknowledged the fact that processed pork can cause cancer in the human body. These are all those side effects of pigs, which we know today thanks to scientific research. But God Almighty was gracious enough to let us know not to eat it 1500 years ago in the Holy Quran, and even before Islam, to the followers of Moses and Jesus. At a time when there was no scientific testing available. This is also a food of thought for all those atheistic people who claim that science is the basis for everything. So the mercy of our God is always with us, and in return we have to love Him and we have to obey Him, and that's the reason we don't eat pork.
Well, that was Naveed Ahmad Zafar Sahib's reply from Pakistan. Qudrat Sahib, you work with Atfal al-Ahmadiyya. Was he able to do justice?
Well, the smile at the end, you know, would have melted any Tifl's heart.
That's
so
the 5 marks that you gave for that.
Definitely. But yeah, mashallah, Naveed Sahib, great job. I felt very comfortable listening to you. The way your body language was, your hand gestures, everything, and the way even you settled yourself, it felt like on the opposing side where the camera was, that's where the Tifl was actually sitting. So, mashallah, great on that. There's a few things that maybe I can ask you, is that you mentioned that great physicians have basically said that if you eat pork, it leads to lack of modesty and shamelessness. Could you elaborate on this?
Yeah, sure. It is actually the continuation of the promised Messiah, where he is, it affects us morally and physically. And when it comes to the modesty and shamelessness, it is no secret that I was a bit limited. I was asked earlier as well that how difficult was it. I could not talk about this to a 12-year-old kid, but now that I'm talking to our esteemed panel of judges, I can take the liberty to talk about this. Two disturbing immoral habits that our pigs are. One of them is homosexuality, and the other one is that two male pigs have a tendency to mate with one female, one after the other, instead of competing, what is generally observed in the animal kingdom.
My question was more towards, you mentioned physicians. I mean, did you read anything from a particular doctor or a scientist?
Is that you asking basically to name a physician, to give a...
I haven't seen any particular physician, but it is also quoted in American Scientific American, an American journal. That is one of the oldest publishing magazines on medicine. It was mentioned there as well.
Naveed Sahib, could I ask you a straightforward question? You mentioned the law of Moses and Jesus prohibiting the flesh of swine. I understand that Christians do allow to eat pork, basically, based on one of the sayings of Prophet Jesus in Gospels, in which he said nothing that goes inside a person defiles him at all. And from that they deduce that pork is lawful. Well, you clearly mentioned that the law of Jesus did not allow eating the flesh of swine?
Summed up from the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 17, where Jesus has said that I have not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law and what the early prophets have said. And when Jesus himself has said that he has come not to abolish the law, we would see what the law itself says. And in the Old Testament, in Leviticus, book of Leviticus and book of Deuteronomy, both of them states that it is a very unclean animal. It is unclean for us. We have the Old Testament prohibits from eating it and even touching its dead body. It says that don't touch its carcasses. So these were the words.
It's a good answer, really.
I think the smile on Mohammed Saab's face is you passed the test. Amr Saab, not too difficult questions. I think Naveed Saab went through.
Sure. Naveed
Saab, a very good answer. I must appreciate.
So just really briefly, Naveed Saab, just to keep in mind that you're speaking to a 12-year-old kid. So this is the age of, short attention spans, internet, iPod. So perhaps a bit of energy into your presentation would have helped. But otherwise, your argumentation was excellent and you covered some really good points, I felt.
Jazakumullah ahsan. Naveed Sahib, Jazakallah to you as well. We're going to move on. Our next Khadim with us on the line, Safwan Akbar Sahib from the United States of America. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Safwan Sahib, and how are you today?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm doing very well, Jazakallah.
Jazakallah for joining us today. Safwan Sahib, where exactly in the United States do you live? Which city? And tell us a little bit about that city. Why is it so great? Why is it so nice to live there?
Sure. So I live in New Jersey, but I'm just a few miles away from New York City, which colloquially I feel like a lot of people might consider, the world's metropolis. So if it contains just a microcosm of all the world's cultures in one unique place. So I think with that, there's an invitation to everyone to come join us.
All right. So what is your feeling telling you? You think you're going to make it to the semis?
Inshallah, I hope so. With the discretion of the judges, we'll see, inshallah.
All right. But before we submit show your video, would you like to say anything to the judges? Ask them anything in specific. Because after that, they're going to ask you.
Right. So I guess in 3 minutes, I wasn't able to, go with specific sources. I think I went with more general terms. So if there is a specific source that I might be misquoting, it would be beneficial for them to correct me or present that to me as well.
All right. That is something that's going to come after. So let's go to your video, Safwan Akbar Sahib from the United States.
Pork seems harmless. It's just food after all, right? I mean, we eat other meat products like beef and chicken. So why is pork so harmful for us? Don't all animals go through barbaric processing practices and are treated harmfully? But look, if you wanted to follow something, wouldn't you follow it through and through? After all, the Bible prohibited consumption of pork in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, and historically pigs were often kept in enclosures where they fed on their own fecal matter, or even garbage. That's far less than sanitary. But maybe your friends aren't religious, and maybe we don't live in the Middle Ages anymore. You could say, well, cows and chickens and other livestock have been found to carry disease and the like, and are kept in the same enclosures to be processed for mass production. So why is pork in particular forbidden? But what if the answer is simpler than that? What if it comes down to Allah merely commanding us to abstain and imploring us not to indulge in something so easily available? We fast for an entire month and we keep away from all food and drink. Is it so hard to think that Allah has merely commanded us to stay away from that one element? We fast from drinking alcohol our entire lives. We fast from vain pleasures. We fast from falsehood and sin. And so in the same light, Allah has commanded us to stay away from pork. The pig is still Allah's creature and there's nothing inherently haram about it or eating it. But it is wrong because Allah has commanded us to not to do so. After all, He says in Surah Al-Ankabut, verse 3, along the lines of, can the believer actually say that we believe and that they will not be tested? It's so we don't forget Allah in the minutiae of our daily lives and we prove our faith and our belief in His word and His teachings. And on a scientific level, pigs are scavengers. They'll eat what they can get. In contrast to cows and chickens, the digestive system is only 4 hours long for a pig. It's so quick that toxins from the food they eat are not eliminated and are stored in the fat. Cows have multiple stomachs, on the other hand, and their digestion takes over 24 hours. And once the pig is slaughtered, those toxins aren't eliminated, and they end up on your dinner table only a few days later. Further, pig line speeds, according to the book, The Chain, they've increased almost 50%. That's too quick to inspect the exact contents of pork material. Pork production is also known as the worst offender of pumping antibiotics into pigs and other animals. That's 4 times more than chicken and cows, and leading to resistance to bacterial growth. And beyond that, the National Pork Board actively marketed in the United States for bacon and other pork products to become staple breakfast items. And it's currently under a federal lawsuit for misappropriation of funds. Thus, it's not merely just Allah's commandment that we follow, but it's rather the scientific principles and the interchanges that are behind it and that's why we don't eat it. And that's why we, in turn, we keep our lifelong fast from it. Jazakallah.
All right, Jazakumullah to Safwan Sahib from the United States. Quite quick and quite fast speaking. Ahmad Sahib, I saw you taking many notes. If you would like to ask him any questions.
Safwan Sahib, Assalamu alaikum. Safwan Sahib, Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah. Yes, I agree. You spoke quite fast, so I had to listen very carefully. And I'm not sure if a kid could keep up. At the same time, you spoke with good energy and a very friendly conversational style. And I do feel a kid would be attracted by that. I genuinely do. So I had a few quick questions. You mentioned, I think that perhaps I understood in some parts what you were trying to say, but it may not have come across correctly. So for example, you said there's nothing inherently wrong about pork meat. However, Allah the Almighty has forbidden it. Could you just explain that, clarify what you meant by that?
Sure. I think in the speed of my speech, I might have confused the viewer. But what I meant to say is that as an animal itself, there's nothing inherently wrong with Allah's creation. It's rather that we must keep a lifelong fast from it because it is His commandment, it is His teaching.
Sure. So that's just a small, humble recommendation. Maybe a kid who's 12-year-old is already looking for clarity and probably is confused. Everywhere around him, he goes to a restaurant and everything is bacon, etc. So it's good to be a little bit clear, slow down a little bit so that you can explain to the kids. So the only thing I would expand on that, where you mentioned about Allah the Almighty forbidding it, perhaps what you could say to a kid is that Allah the Almighty is the creator. He has created everything, including all animals. And even leave aside pigs, even other animals, Allah the Almighty has told us what we can eat and can't eat and given us reasons for it. And before we eat anything that's even permissible, we say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, to say that we only eat with the permission of Allah. He gives us permission and then we eat those things. Now if Allah the Almighty is the creator and He knows all of His creation and He tells us not to eat a particular animal, then surely we should listen to it, A, because He's the creator, and because He knows His creation, there must be a reason for it. So perhaps just expanding it with a bit of clarity would help.
Mohammed Sahib.
Safwan Sahib, I like the way you started your video because you started by asking different questions actually. And I like the way you started it because this made you a bit more agreeable and approachable to a kid. And then when you started answering those questions, when you said, I feel that you were at times as if you were contradicting to what you had earlier said in the answer. For example, in the beginning you said that there is nothing inherently haram about a pig, but it's merely a test from God Almighty, and later on in the same video you said that there are a lot of things which are wrong in pork and in pig, and then you started telling, for example, that their meat contains a large amount of toxins and everything. You discussed all these things. So you sort of contradicted when you said that.
It seemed. Yeah.
I should say, probably. So what do you say about that?
Jazakallah for that comment. But I think I made an absolutist of a statement, I think, in saying it's not inherently wrong, because clearly there are facets of things that we abstain from and we're forbidden from doing. So I think maybe I should have refrained from using such an absolutist, all in all inclusive statement that might lead me to making these rational errors later on.
Qudrat Sahib, only positive.
Yeah, there's plenty of positives. I love your style, and I'm sure with your the tone of your voice, the way you're speaking, and for me, an American accent's a good way forward anyway. So that's a positive for me.
I think there was one
small
that was
thing
needed,
which I need to. I think you mentioned the Surah Al-Ankabut. I think you mentioned it as Al-Kabut or something, or maybe that's how it came as in the audio, but it's Al-Ankabut, which is the surah which is translated as the spider.
Yeah.
So just again, slow down a little bit, and so we have a bit of clarity.
I think because for the clarification of our viewers as well, it's sometimes the audio quality or the video quality, because most of the videos are recorded via cell phones or mobile phones, so that's why we thought it's easier for everyone. Everybody has the a phone camera, so it's easier for them to record, and they are able to do that as well. Safwan Sahib, Jazakumullah Ahsan for your video. Our last contestant for today's show is Muhammad Izhar Raja Sahib from Pakistan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Raja Sahib.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
If I may ask you, when MTA called you or informed you that you have been selected for the show, what was your reaction?
Obviously, I was really happy, and I was thanking God for this opportunity. Rather, it was a pleasure for me.
All right. For today's reply, this scenario that we gave you, where did you get the material from? Did you ask anyone for help, or did you get help from someone?
Obviously, the first source, the Holy Quran, and obviously the interpretations or the explanations as given by the Holy Promised Messiah Islam and his Caliph. So, following this pattern, I actually consulted two books. One was the book of the Promised Messiah Islam, that was the philosophy of the teachings of Islam, and the second one was a lecture that was delivered in 1924 to the Wembley Conference by Khalifatul Masih II. So these two books really helped to clarify my thoughts and imaginations about this topic.
You already scored with Qudusa when you mentioned the Holy Quran first, I think. Actually, with everyone. Jazakallah. Let's go to the reply that Raja Sahib sent us.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. An Ahmadi Tifl is not allowed to eat pork to be rewarded. As it happens when you play a video game and you get a lot of bonus and rewards and a lot of coins fill your bucket. So here you cannot eat pork not only to be rewarded but to get two rewards at the same time. How? Being an Ahmadi Tifl, you know that Allah has prohibited us from eating pork in the Holy Quran. Now whenever you will come across pork, the first thing that will come in your mind is that your mind will revert to God. So you will get your first reward for this remembering of Allah. You will get the second reward at the very instant when you will be acting on the commandment of Allah and will stopping yourself from eating pork. Then you cannot eat pork because it is harmful for us in different ways. For example, it is very commonly known about this animal that it eats its own droppings and filth, proves to be bad for our health. Then it is also commonly known for this animal that it has an unnatural habit and is utterly shameless animal. And as is the law that whatever we eat, it affects our body and as well as our habits, proves to be bad for our habits. Then medical science has also discovered that there are a lot of diseases which are actually caused by eating pork. For example, pork tapeworms, trichinosis and pig bell, to mention a few. Now you must be thinking that why, if it is such a bad thing, then why a lot of people around us are eating pork freely? The answer to this question is that all these ill effects and others as well that I have just mentioned, they are not directly and immediately traceable, because of which, not bothering about the consequences, people freely eat pork. Their example is just like that of a child who insists for cold and chilled water in a very cold season, but his parents do not comply with his demand. Why? Because that child does not know, but his parents have full knowledge about the consequences. So, we who believe that Allah, who has created each and everything and has the perfect knowledge of everything, having the knowledge of all these consequences, has prohibited us from eating pork in the Holy Quran. So these are some points which shows that an Ahmadi kid cannot eat pork.
Well, Jazakumullah, that was Izhar Raja Sahib from Pakistan, his reply. Unfortunately, there are no marks for the video itself because he had clearly won when it comes to that, Qudrat Sahib. Other than that,
it was like 4K, huh? I loved Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah, Izhar Sahib. I loved the way how you started it. It reminded me of the video game Super Mario, where you're collecting all the points and trying to score. So great start as a Tifl. I think you'll be onto a winner. You mentioned before we actually heard the video that you consulted the Holy Quran a lot. I just want to clarify, which verses did you find that supported what you're saying?
If you are talking about the prohibition of eating pork, then I could find actually 4 verses from the Holy Quran. It is Surah Al-Baqarah, Al-An'am, Al-Ma'idah, and An-Nahl. And if you have time, I can go to the further reference as well.
What does Allah in particular say about? Of course, it's haram, it's impermissible to eat, but He uses a particular word to describe what the lahmul khinzir is.
Well, the one word that I am just remembering is muharraman. It is stated in Surah Al-An'am, that is verse 146. And it says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قل لا أجد فيما أوحي إلي محرما على طاعم يطعمه إلا أن يكون ميتة أو دما مسفوحا أو لحم خنزير, and so on and so forth.
Okay, Jazakallah. That was the verse I was looking for.
Right. Moment Sahib.
I think, Izhar Sahib, you missed the important point in the verse where God Almighty had said after that, فَإِنَّهُ رِجْسٌ, that they are not allowed or they are haram because they are impure or unclean. I mean, God Almighty has prohibited the consumption of these 3 things, or called them haram, carrion, and blood, and the flesh of swine, because innahu rijsun, because they are unclean or impure. So this was probably the important part of the verse which you missed while you were referring to the verse. Anyhow, I like your video. It's a good actually submission. Thank you very much for that.
Do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I think he's a pretty strong candidate in terms of he's covered all the bases, and he covered them quite well. It's an interesting contrast from the brother before, who was speaking extremely fast, and this brother was speaking relatively slow. So yeah, let's see.
Let's see, because now it's the time for you to decide, and also for our viewers at home, because the lines are now open. You can go online, www.mta.tv/face2face. 2 is the number 2, face to face, and cast your vote for our 5 contestants. In the beginning, we had Sajeel Ahmad Sahib from Pakistan, then Jari Qudrat Sahib from Canada. We had Naveed Ahmad Zafar Sahib from Pakistan, followed by Safwan Akbar Sahib from the United States of America. And you have just listened to Muhammad Izhar Raja Sahib's reply from Pakistan as well. Remember, the lines are open for just a few minutes because the program is ending in 10 minutes, so we have to collect the votes as well. Go online, www.mta.tv/face2face. Mohammed Sahib, while you're, sorry to disturb you while you're casting your marks, overall, the program and the contestants, what was your feedback for that?
I think they had prepared very well. I mean, for example, one of the contestants, I don't even remember his name, I asked him a very difficult question, and he straight away answered it very, very well. And similarly, even the last contestant, Raja Sahib from Pakistan, Qudrat Sahib asked him for a verse of Quran, and he straight away started actually telling that there are 4 verses of the Quran. Which,
I was surprised by that as well.
Yeah. So the amount of research that they have done, all the contestants have done, probably that has fulfilled the purpose of the program, because this was probably the main purpose of the program, to educate our youth and to prepare them for these questions.
Exactly, and these questions have not been,
never been
forwarded beforehand.
They were impromptu questions, but they answered them very well. So I was impressed with their preparation.
All right.
And the way they have actually, it's a tough contest, I would say. I talked about one of the contestants, said I see him going through to the next round, but now
I'll have to say.
That's why you keep that comment at the end. Well, Jazakallah, as I said, the voters or the viewers at home are voting as well, and we are going to let our judges, respected judges here in the studio, give their marks, and to finalize that as well. It's going to take us a little bit of time. So in the meantime, something that we showed you last time as well, we mentioned that over 100 replies we received when we gave the first scenario for basically the qualifier. What was the need, or what is the need for religion? And of course, 25 of these more than 100 replies were chosen for this for this season or for this show, and unfortunately we couldn't take the remaining. But we thought, why not show you in each program a little bit of these views and a little bit of the replies that unfortunately couldn't make it to the quarterfinals. And here is the second group of those brothers who sent us a video, but unfortunately we couldn't include them into the program.
In my opinion, religion is needed today more than ever, because there is so much corruption in the world today, there is so much restlessness, and there is so many people suffering around the world, and we need religion to bring peace to the world and its people.
So therefore it is necessary that laws should be made by someone who is superior to man, who has nothing to gain or lose by that law, and with whom every man has equal relations. There is need for a self-sufficient, who is in no need of man's praise, nor does he need anything from him. And that is the supreme being, the God, the Almighty.
Because religion gives us hope, shows us paths of triumph and success.
But without religion, we would not know the purpose of the existence of the whole of mankind. Religion has taught us such high moral qualities as would not be possible without it. It has provided us the solutions to our problems. It has created a balance in the society, and moreover, it has created a connection between two beings, that is the human being and the supreme being, that is God the Almighty.
Because religion provides us with the guidelines, the guidebook, the procedure, a system of nourishment for the soul. And in essence, these guidelines and guidebooks state that the main purpose of the soul is to find God, is to get nearer to Allah.
Furthermore, what we see is that with the lack of religion, there is a moral ambiguity in society that has led to the birth of a extremist progressive movement that aims to erase all boundaries under the false pretense of freedom and liberty.
If we want to establish a society with peace and harmony, religion is our guide.
Religion refers to an institution where people believe in a supernatural being, and they organize themselves as a group to worship this supernatural being.
Religion even goes to the extent and that teaches that humanity and mankind is like one body. If one part of the body is feeling pain, and so does the other.
Islam is a complete way of life. It gives us many rules and regulations in every aspect of our lives.
Ever, because the condition of the world is threatened by nuclear war at every waking instance.
Religion is necessary to establish world peace. In fact, it is the most advanced formula for world peace, because peace can only come from divine guidance. Human thinking alone cannot produce this element of theology.
All right, so Jazakumullah Asnazah to those brothers as well who sent us their answer to the first scenario that we gave them. And again, unfortunately, we could not include them in the program. Now, the final results are out. Unanimously, 2 contestants have been chosen by you, the viewers at home, and of course, the judges here in the studio as well. Jari Qudrat Sahib from Canada and Muhammad Izhar Raja Sahib from Pakistan will make their way to the semi-finals. Congratulations, Mubarak to all, to both of the contestants. They're with us on the line. Jari Sahib and Raja Sahib, hopefully the pointers that the judges gave you will be an integral part in how you form your answer in the next round. Anything that you would like to ask our judges? Jalila Saab, if I can start with you maybe.
No, Jazakallah. I have no questions.
All right. Izhar Sahib.
First of all praise goes to Allah, alhamdulillah. And secondly, I think the difficult job is in the hands of judges. Well, I think answering is not that much difficult as the job done by these respected members to judge those entries. So hats off and best of luck for the next program.
All right, Jazakumullah Sanzani, absolutely right. You do have the toughest job here. But Jazakumullah Abdul Qudus Arif Sahib, Atal Momin Zahid Sahib and Amr Safir Sahib for joining us today and taking over the hard part of the program. Next week we will be with you again, inshallah. And the scenario, there's a new scenario that we have chosen for the next group of contestants, group number 3. And of course, from them, again, 2 people will be chosen for the semi-finals as well. Before we ask for some concluding remarks from our judges, I'll just give you quickly that scenario. Your colleague at work is prepared to convert to Islam. However, as always, however, they say they cannot understand the need for parda. What would you say to them? That is a scenario that we will take a look at next week. Qudus Sahib, would you like to...
Yes, I think the results, they could have gone anywhere.
Yeah.
It was very close. When I casted my own vote, I thought, there was 2-3 people who had exactly the same vote. So, credit goes to all those that participated. And those that are going forward, make sure that whatever you say, there's a particular source to it. It shouldn't be something which is out of thin air. So that's probably the way forward.
Specifically to do with this topic, about pork and consumption of pork, it's always a different thing how you look at it, because we had contestants from the East, from Asia, from an Islamic society, so-called Islamic society, and we had contestants from the West. Do you consider that as well in how satisfied that child would be in with that answer that they're giving?
Yeah, there was an interesting contrast between our brothers from the East and the West. I felt probably the brothers from the East had a bit more stronger research and references from the Quran, etc. As Momin Saab, one of our judges, had asked, they responded very good. The brothers from the West, however, their delivery and conviction seemed better. And I think that's interesting when you look at the voting charts. You look at conviction, what's the other one again? Delivery and argumentation. So some people focus just on one, but their delivery or conviction lets them down. So I think it's important to be able to get all 3 of those categories to be able to get your marks up.
And when you thought this week was tough, Momin Saab, next week is going to be
even tougher.
Even tougher. Which is a good thing too, because the quality is going to go up definitely. Jazakumullah again, once again to the respected judges here in the studio. Jazakumullah to you for watching and staying with us. As I said, next week 7 p.m. live here on MTA next Sunday. Inshallah, we'll see you then. Take care of yourself. Have a lovely evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
In exactly the same way that the Holy Prophet ﷺ knew that what God is telling me is the truth. He never stopped preaching. And in the same way, we won't stop preaching.
It's against the teaching of Islam to force anyone into belief, which is la ikraha fi din. There's no compulsion in matters of faith.